Welcome to Immortal Musings 8, the ongoing story of my journey in fighting terminal cancer, stage 4, transitional cell carcinoma. Since today is December 19th, I'll call this my Christmas episode, but it's not really a Christmassy episode, except that I did get an early Christmas present last week from my doctor, who gave me the good news that my tumor has stopped growing as of, I guess, the MRIs that were taken the end of last month. So that's wonderful news. Of course, that doesn't mean that they are shrinking. It just means they stopped growing. So in one sense, it's kind of like getting a suspended 6-month sentence, because prior to treatment, I had about 6 months to live by various estimates. So that has been suspended. So I've got a suspended 6-month sentence. Yay! But I suspect it'll be suspended for a long, long time, and hopefully we'll start shrinking that tumor with the next 4 treatments and see where we go from there. Also on the 9th, I received what I think is my 5th treatment, chemo treatment. The treatment itself went just fine. Really not an issue. Just sit there and have this tube sticking out of your chest. And you just sit there and read and type on the computer or watch TV or read a book or whatever you want to do. You just can't go anywhere. But I have noticed that the after effects of the chemo seem to get worse each time. I've been, most of the following week, I was sick following chemo, which is not unusual, and certainly I'm not complaining because I'll take the results over the side effects any day. But at the same time, it's disheartening that I'm not being able to be as productive as I would like to be. I feel like I really should be. But at the same time, it's a good trade-off. You may notice that my hair is getting thinner and sadly grayer. Another effect of the chemo. What I wasn't anticipating, I was expecting the hair to get thinner on top and it may in fact disappear over time. What I really wasn't affect is that it's not just your hair on your head that you lose, but it's the hair all over your body. I look down and it's like I've got swimmer's legs, like somebody's taken a razor and shaved off my legs. My arms too, for that matter. So it definitely is a weird feeling. But again, not complaining. Today is the day that I get to pick up my kids from the airport. Lizzie is flying in from Richmond, Virginia, and Matt's flying in from Los Angeles. And I'll get to have them both for a week through Christmas, which is very exciting to me, and certainly is a great Christmas present. First time I've had them both here for this long a period of time, so in a long, long time. So that's going to be wonderful. And I got a lot of work for them to do. I'll put them to work, that's for sure. I'm not going to get into it in a big way on today's session. This is kind of a hodgepodge session, but on the Today Show, they had a nice, today, they had a segment on life after death experiences. And of course, those are very, very heartwarming and very encouraging. My doctor sister says, well, it's just the endorphins being released from the brain that stimulate the pleasure centers, and it's all locked in your imagination. But at the same time, you find it curious that the experience is so similar for everyone. You'd think that if it's just simply a release of brain chemicals and various areas being stimulated by your imminent death, that the experiences would be very dramatically different by people, because we have different pleasures, different senses, different experiences. Yet these experiences have a lot of similarities that make them hard to ignore. And of course, I personally do believe that there is a a transition, that we do go on beyond. I've always held that. No idea what that transition is going to be, but it certainly does make me less afraid of what's to come, and that's always encouraging. I am always been a huge believer in the things that we don't know, that we know so little about the world around us. I've always been fascinated by things like psychic phenomena. In fact, I studied it and taught a course in parapsychology when I was at the University of Kansas. And I know it exists. I know it as much as I know that the air I breathe and I can't see the air that I breathe, except when I go to LA, but I know it's there. And just like I know psychic phenomena exist. I've had too many of my own experiences that defy explanation by any other logical means. So when you start trying to take all of these things that we don't know, and you can also throw in ghost experiences and spirits and things like this, as well as religious miracles that people have described. There's just so much that we don't know. And I happen to believe that there's a story there, and that there is as much to learn about our world than we've already learned, if that makes any sense. So hopefully I'll have a session dedicated to psychic phenomena down the road, and we'll get into more of my beliefs and maybe even some theories. But suffice it to say that I've had too many experiences and seen too many things that just defy logic, kind of like the election. And speaking of which, I try to keep this very apolitical, but I do want to share and go totally off on a tangent here and share with you my theory on the Russian involvement in our election and the true reason why they got involved. And I don't think it has anything to do with Hillary, or very, very little to do with Hillary, other than the fact that they didn't want her elected. It has to do with oil. You have to look back to when our oil prices started falling dramatically. And I kid everybody that I tell everybody that I was responsible for the fall in oil prices because it occurred the week that I bought my hybrid. But here's my theory, and I've shared this theory with a lot of people, and I've never ever heard it on the media. Maybe I just don't know the right media, but it fits all the facts. And I happen to believe that this is really what happened. You have to take a look at what's going on in the world when the oil prices went down and ask yourself this question. Who in the world is hurt worst by falling gas prices? And it's not the U.S., not by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, one could argue that except for the oil and gas industry, the economy has actually improved by the oil drop in gas prices. The oil and gas industry was hurt, but let's face it, we're a rich nation. We can afford that. But what country can't afford it and couldn't? Well, the answer to me is Russia. And you start looking back, what was happening to Russia, whose economy is very, very strongly based on oil. And they have been absolutely devastated by this drop in oil prices. And you start looking at what was happening in the world when the oil prices went down. Well, Russia had just invaded the Ukraine, they had annexed the Crimea, and they were making all sorts of puffing of the chest notions that, they were going to get back to their old Soviet Union ways. So that's item one. Russia is obviously very hurt by this. So that's either a very happy coincidence or it's something else. But here's what really tipped the scales to me. previously, whenever the oil prices have gone down, what has happened? Well, the Arab nations, OPEC, would get together and they'd cut production every time. That would cause the prices to go back up. But it didn't happen this time. OPEC continued to maintain production. You have to ask yourself, why would OPEC do this? It certainly is not self-serving, because they get hurt by the falling gas prices as much as anybody, although their economies are strength. Well, there's another enemy of theirs that also is impacted by the falling gas prices, and that's ISIS. ISIS has been heavily funded by the oil industry, and not the oil industry, but their takeover of oil wells in Iraq and Iran and Syria and elsewhere. Which brings us to the second group that was really hurt by the oil crisis, and that is ISIS. ISIS primary funding comes from oil. And so, again, is it a happy coincidence that 2.5 years ago that when they were gathering their biggest strength, that all of a sudden their economy was taken out from under them? I think not. So my feeling is that the United States is the only country that could have manipulated this, who could have created the oil, I would say crisis was certainly not a crisis, but the manipulation of the oil market, and had the strength to get OPEC to go along with it. So I think these are one of those, Obama in his newscast yesterday talked about, you may never hear about the retaliation because it's something that they don't want to publicize. Well, I think that was our strike. That was our first strike. Had nothing to do with hacking. It had to do with manipulating the oil market to the detriment of Russia and ISIS. And I think Russia knew full well what's going on, and this election hacking was meant to get back at Obama and send a message to the United States that they don't want the interference. So with our new president, who's very pro-Russia, I expect the oil prices to shoot up again. So by summer, my prediction is that we'll have $3 gas once again. And unfortunately, that may likely lead to a recession. So at any rate, that's my one political gem, but I did want to share it to as many people. So see what you think. Let me know.